Preparing for AI, GenAI at MUFG interview? You've reached Candy Mentor, and this video is for you. We'll walk through 20 key questions you're likely to face. For each question you'll see a sample answer followed by the key points to cover. Subscribe, like, and share, and drop a topic request in the comments. Question 1. What is the difference between traditional AI and generative AI, and where would you apply GenAI in banking? Traditional AI predicts labels, scores, or numerical outcomes, while generative AI creates text, code, images, or structured responses from learned patterns. In banking, I would use GenAI for document summarization, analyst assistance, customer service drafting, and knowledge retrieval. I would not let it independently approve credit or execute transactions. Every deployment needs approved data, access controls, citations, monitoring, and human review. The key distinction is that fluent output still requires validation before it influences regulated decisions. While answering, distinguish prediction from content generation, discuss banking use cases, emphasize human oversight, data confidentiality, factuality, auditability, and measurable business value rather than novelty. Question 2. How would you reduce hallucinations in a GenAI application used by bank employees? I would reduce hallucinations by grounding responses in trusted, versioned bank documents through retrieval-augmented generation. The prompt would require citations and instruct the model to say it cannot find an answer rather than guess. I would add metadata filters, structured output validation, and human approval for high-impact workflows. Offline tests would measure factuality and citation accuracy, while production monitoring would sample responses and track escalation rates. Lower temperature helps, but it cannot replace sound architecture. Make sure to cover retrieval grounding, constrained prompts, source citations, confidence handling, abstention, output validation, human review, evaluation datasets, and production monitoring for unsupported claims. Question 3. Design a secure RAG assistant for MUFG employees to search internal policies and procedures. I would ingest approved policy documents, preserve versions and permissions, split content by meaningful sections, and store embeddings with document metadata. At query time, the employee identity would filter retrieval before the language model sees any text. The response would include citations, document dates, and an abstention path. I would encrypt data, log access and prompts safely, protect secrets, and evaluate retrieval and answer quality separately. Reindexing and rollback would support policy changes and recovery. In your answer, cover ingestion, chunking, embeddings, vector search, identity-aware retrieval, prompt construction, citations, encryption, audit logs, evaluation, and disaster recovery. Question 4. What is prompt injection, and how would you defend against it in an enterprise GenAI system? Prompt injection occurs when malicious instructions in a user request or retrieved document manipulate the model into ignoring its intended task. I treat retrieved text as untrusted data, not instructions. Defenses include separating system policy from content, limiting tools and permissions, validating structured outputs, filtering dangerous requests, and requiring confirmation for consequential actions. I would also test adversarially with poisoned documents and jailbreaks. No single prompt rule is sufficient. Defense in depth is essential. Be sure to mention direct and indirect injection, untrusted content boundaries, instruction hierarchy, tool permissions, input filtering, output validation, least privilege, and adversarial testing. Question 5. When would you choose fine-tuning over RAG for a financial GenAI application? I choose RAG when the model needs changing facts, policies, or private documents because retrieval keeps knowledge updatable and traceable. I consider fine-tuning when I need consistent behavior, formatting, domain language, or task-specific classification that prompting cannot reliably achieve. Fine-tuning is not a good substitute for current factual knowledge. It costs more to train and govern, and it can forget useful capabilities. In practice, I often fine-tune behavior while using RAG for authoritative content. While answering, compare knowledge updates, factual grounding, style control, training cost, privacy, latency, maintenance, catastrophic forgetting, and the possibility of combining RAG with fine-tuning. Question 6. How would you evaluate the quality and safety of an LLM used for customer service support? I would build a representative, versioned evaluation set containing normal, ambiguous, sensitive, and adversarial customer queries. Metrics would include answer correctness, groundedness, citation quality, appropriate refusal, escalation accuracy, latency, and cost. Human reviewers would score clarity and policy adherence using a rubric, with separate safety testing for privacy, toxicity, and bias. I would red team every release, compare against a baseline, and monitor real interactions. Evaluation must continue because prompts, documents, and models change. In your answer, cover task-specific test sets, accuracy, groundedness, refusal quality, toxicity, privacy, bias, latency, human review, red teaming, and continuous evaluation after model changes. Question 7. How would you protect personally identifiable and financial information in a GenAI pipeline? I start with data minimization. Send only the fields required for the task. Sensitive values should be classified, masked or tokenized, encrypted in transit and at rest, and excluded from model training unless explicitly approved. Identity-aware access, short retention, secret management, and immutable audit logs are important controls. I would also review the provider's data use terms, prevent cross-tenant leakage, test prompts for exposure, and establish deletion and incident response procedures. Make sure to discuss data minimization, classification, masking, tokenization, encryption, retention, access control, provider isolation, auditability, consent, and preventing sensitive data from entering training. Question 8. How would you select an LLM for an MUFG production use case? I would begin with the business task and define required quality, latency, data residency, availability, and regulatory constraints. Then I would benchmark several models on representative, approved examples, including English and Japanese if relevant, rather than trusting public leaderboards. I would compare accuracy, groundedness, refusal behavior, token cost, throughput, and operational support. A smaller model may be preferable for routine tasks, while a larger model handles complex reasoning. I would also plan provider portability. Focus on capability, factuality, Japanese and multilingual performance, privacy, controllability, latency, throughput, cost, availability, vendor risk, licensing, and evaluation on representative bank data. Question 9. How would you optimize latency and cost in a high-volume GenAI application? I would first measure where time and money go: retrieval, queuing, model inference, retries, and output length. Then I would route simple requests to smaller models, reduce irrelevant context, cap tokens, cache-safe repeated results, stream responses, and batch asynchronous work. Auto-scaling and rate limits protect reliability during peaks. I would test every optimization against quality and safety metrics. Lower cost is not success if users receive incomplete answers or sensitive information is mishandled. Be sure to mention model routing, prompt compression, caching, streaming, batching, retrieval limits, token budgets, auto-scaling, rate limits, and measuring quality before accepting optimization trade-offs. Question 10. What are the risks of using autonomous AI agents for banking workflows, and how would you control them? An agent can chain tools and actions, so a mistaken assumption may create financial, privacy, or operational damage. I would constrain it to a narrow workflow, expose only allo-listed tools, validate every argument, and impose transaction limits. High-impact actions require explicit human approval, while deterministic services perform authorization and compliance checks. Idempotency, audit trails, timeouts, sandboxing, and rollback reduce blast radius. I would begin with read-only assistance before permitting controlled execution. In your answer, discuss bounded tasks, tool permissions, transaction limits, approval gates, deterministic checks, ID impotency, rollback, observability, sandboxing, and human accountability. Question 11. Explain embeddings and vector databases, and describe how they support semantic search. An embedding converts text into a numerical vector where semantically related content tends to be nearby. A vector database indexes those vectors and retrieves candidates using approximate nearest neighbor search, commonly with cosine or dot product similarity. I would chunk documents carefully, attach permissions and dates as metadata, and filter before or during retrieval. The language model then uses the selected passages as context. Poor chunking, stale indexes, or weak retrieval will produce poor answers regardless of model size. While answering, explain vector representations, similarity metrics, chunking, metadata filters, approximate nearest neighbor search, indexing, freshness, and why retrieval quality affects final answer quality. Question 12. How would you make a GenAI system explainable enough for a regulated banking environment? I would distinguish explanation from merely displaying a model's generated reasoning. For a retrieval assistant, I would show source documents, passages, timestamps, and the transformation from question to answer. For predictive decisions, I would use approved interpretable features or generate validated reason codes independently of the LLM. Prompts, models, retrieved content, approvals, and outputs need version audit records. I would keep GenAI advisory where explanations cannot be reliably verified, especially for consequential customer decisions. Make sure to cover traceable sources, decision boundaries, prompt and model versioning, reproducibility, confidence limitations, reason codes, human review, audit trails, and separating assistance from automated decisions. Question 13. How would you identify and mitigate bias in a banking AI or GenAI solution? I would define fairness requirements with compliance and business stakeholders before training or deployment. Testing should compare performance, refusal rates, recommendations, and error types across relevant demographic and language groups, while respecting privacy. I would investigate proxy variables, sampling gaps, and historical bias rather than assuming removing protected attributes solves the problem. Mitigations might include better data, reweighting, constraints, or human review. I would document trade-offs and monitor subgroup outcomes after launch, not only during development. In your answer, discuss representative data, protected groups, subgroup metrics, proxy features, disparate impact, human review, fairness trade-offs, documentation, and monitoring after deployment. Question 14. Describe an effective MLOps and LLMOps lifecycle for a production GenAI application. I would manage prompts, retrieval configurations, datasets, models, and evaluation results as versioned artifacts. A pipeline would run security checks, offline quality tests, regression tests, and approval gates before deployment. Canary releases and feature flags limit exposure, while monitoring tracks latency, cost, errors, groundedness, refusals, and drift. Feedback is reviewed rather than blindly used for training. Clear ownership, rollback capability, incident playbooks, and documented model limitations turn experimentation into an operable service. Be sure to mention data and prompt versioning, reproducible evaluation, CD gates, model registry, security scanning, deployment strategies, monitoring, rollback, feedback loops, and ownership. Question 15. A GenAI assistant starts producing inaccurate policy answers after a document update. How would you investigate and respond? I would first contain the issue by disabling affected answers or routing users to verified documents, then notify the service owner and relevant risk stakeholders. I would reproduce examples and inspect document parsing, chunking, metadata filters, retrieval rankings, prompt versions, and model changes. Versioned artifacts should let me roll back quickly. After identifying the cause, I would correct the pipeline, add regression cases, validate citations and policy dates, document the incident, and monitor closely during re-release. Focus on incident containment, reproducibility, retrieval diagnostics, document versioning, prompt changes, model drift, rollback, communication, root cause analysis, and regression tests before reopening access. Question 16. How would you design a GenAI system that supports both Japanese and English banking content? I would evaluate multilingual models on real, approved Japanese and English examples, including financial terminology, honorifics, abbreviations, and mixed language documents. I would preserve the source language when possible instead of translating everything, because translation can alter legal meaning. Language-aware retrieval, metadata, prompts, and response templates improve consistency. I would maintain bilingual glossaries and have native language reviewers assess accuracy and tone. Metrics must be reported separately by language, since strong English results can hide Japanese weaknesses. In your answer, cover multilingual model evaluation, terminology consistency, tokenization, translation risks, locale-specific policies, retrieval quality, human review, and separate quality measurements by language. Question 17. What governance controls should exist before deploying GenAI in a major financial institution? Before deployment, I would classify the use case by customer impact, autonomy, data sensitivity, and regulatory risk. Governance should assign accountable owners, maintain a model and prompt inventory, require documented intended use and limitations, and conduct independent validation where appropriate. Privacy, security, vendor, and legal reviews should happen before production. Controls include access management, human approval, monitoring, incident response, and periodic reassessment. Governance should enable safe delivery, not become a checklist disconnected from the workflow. Make sure to discuss use case classification, risk assessment, model inventory, ownership, validation, privacy, third-party risk, documentation, approvals, monitoring, and human accountability. Question 18. How would you build a GenAI assistant that summarizes financial research without introducing unsupported conclusions? I would retrieve only approved research and market documents, preserve source metadata, and ask the model to separate reported facts, analyst opinions, and generated synthesis. The output would use a fixed structure with section-level citations and explicit uncertainty. Numerical claims would be extracted and checked programmatically where possible. Confidentiality rules would restrict access and retention. Before release, analysts would compare summaries against references, and high-impact publications would require human approval rather than automatic distribution. Discuss source selection, extraction versus inference, section-level citations, numerical verification, structured summaries, uncertainty, confidentiality, human review, and testing against analyst-approved references. Question 19. How would you explain the business value and ROI of an enterprise GenAI initiative to stakeholders? I would start with a painful, measurable workflow such as document search or draft preparation, then establish a baseline for time, quality, errors, and employee effort. A pilot should compare assisted and unassisted groups while measuring adoption, cycle time, groundedness, escalation, and operational cost. I would include model fees, integration, security, review, and training costs in the business case. If productivity improves without increasing risk, we can expand gradually, otherwise, we refine or stop. While answering, connect use cases to measurable outcomes, establish a baseline, include quality and risk metrics, account for infrastructure and review costs, and propose a controlled pilot. Question 20. What would you prioritize when building a responsible GenAI roadmap for MUFG? I would prioritize use cases that improve employee productivity without making autonomous financial decisions, such as internal search, summarization, and drafting. In parallel, I would build reusable identity, retrieval, evaluation, logging, and governance capabilities instead of isolated experiments. Each pilot needs an owner, baseline, risk assessment, success metrics, and a clear exit path. Training employees to verify outputs is essential. After evidence supports value and safety, I would expand carefully into more complex workflows. Be sure to mention low-risk high-value pilots, reusable platforms, data foundations, security, governance, employee enablement, measurable outcomes, regional needs, and staged expansion based on evidence. If you are still with us, congratulations! You are much ahead of the rest and serious about preparing for your interview. We hope we were able to add value to your preparation and create some helpful content. Do not forget to like and share this video. Your small act can do great things for us.